Share via email. Report story. Chapter 5. This feels like a punishment, Crow whined as he and Uravati walked the few blocks to the police department. They were fortunately walking in the opposite direction of yesterday's incident, and Uravati had done everything in her power not to look in its direction as they crossed the street. The debris from the 12-story collapse still littered much of the intersection despite the round-the-clock work to remove it. They might not have even found everyone who had once lived in the building. It filled her with grief. The news last night had barely covered hers and Deku's fight with the undead monstrosity, citing the graphic nature of the villain's quirk. She doubted there wasn't a video out there somewhere of the fight, but at least no one was questioning Deku's methods on live television. He didn't need it and didn't deserve it, as far as she was concerned. Crow's fight, however, had been shown, although the dust had obscured much of it that reminded her. Well, you were extremely reckless yesterday and insubordinate, too. Uravati put her hands to her hips. She was only partially serious, fully aware by now that those words meant little to her young charge. He just yawned. Yeah, but I didn't have to come. Yukio even said so this isn't mandatory. But she also made it sound like it was, anyway. In all honesty, it's not. Yukio doesn't operate like that, Uravati assured him, falling back into her role as mentor. This will be a great opportunity for you to get acquainted with the police and see what goes on during an interrogation. I watch enough true crime TV. He smirked. Uravati sighed, her shoulders falling. Did he not get it, or was he just being difficult? It's different when you're the one that captured the villain. You'll see. It was just before 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and already the summer heat was on full blast, creeping into even the shadows behind the buildings. Uravati was thankful today would be spent indoors. Overtime wasn't something she often welcomed, but if it meant she could spend the day with Deku, then she couldn't really call it work anymore. The air temperature around her face began to feel just a little hotter and the springtime butterflies took flight. Oh, right, Deku will be there, too, huh? Crow interjected knowingly, ever the observant jokester. Is he going to be the one interrogating? Ochako jumped out of Uravati's skin for a brief moment. I don't know. Crow snickered as they climbed the steps up to the front doors of the police station, his question just a ploy to see her squirm a little. Uravati composed herself and huffed before continuing. Deku is a police-based hero, not a full-on detective, as far as I know, so, I'm not sure what role he'll play in the questioning. Crow shrugged. He'd get her every single day, and it was at this point she almost begged to be in Mina and Toru's presence about the same subject. At least they seemed more supportive. In contrast, Crow found it incredibly amusing his direct supervisor had such an obvious crush on her case partner. He found great joy in needling in that fact at every opportunity, and it took all of Uravati's strength not to dissolve in the acid of Ochako's emotions. She couldn't allow herself to be mixed into it, at least not when she was supposed to be on duty. As they checked into the police station, Uravati kept the conversation squarely on their duties, and Crow finally let her off the hook. She led him through the building to the elevators that would deliver them to the correct floor as detailed in Deku's text that morning. Floor 8, Homicide. When the elevator doors opened, they were greeted by a sprawling room in chaos. As telephones rang off the hook, people discussed clues and cases, and officers moved from one end to the other. This wasn't the first time Uravati had been here, but it was definitely busier than she had ever seen it on a Saturday, no less. Promoted stories. You'll also like. The hero who sings with a smile 38.9K 365 high. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. Izuku's Harem Academia 187K 1.7 Cust. Read. Ohm fluke a day 112K 8.2 kilo amperes. Collection of short Ohm Fluko for 365 days. Please check the second book for the rest of the day's update. Convicted Hearts 3680 like my other story but ILI longer. Much needed love Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu. 51.3K809 after Wattpad. Had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Free. Oni Shots 149K3K. This is a collections of free X readers. Requests on this are now closed. The Heroes Return MHAXJJK, ongoing 114K 1.7K and quad. Izuku. Midoriya, after being betrayed and killed, vanishes leaving hurt people behind. After 2 months and a hack, he come back, changed. How will the class re? Uraraka, came Deku's voice from behind her. Crow's comments over the past week permeated into her thoughts, and for a split second, she forgot how to speak to him. Her cheeks turned an even more damning shade of pink. Luckily for her, Deku was accompanied by a familiar man in a tan trench coat who shifted her focus back to the issue at hand. Detective Tsukauchi also greeted them with a warm smile. Uravati. It's been some time. How have you been? I've been well, thank you, detective. I brought along my intern, Crow, for today's interrogation. He was the one that brought down that bad villain. Deku told me all about it and I saw the video. Tsukauchi extended his hand for Crow to shake. Hard to believe you're still a student. Echo is the name of that villain, and he's not the nicest guy around. Thanks for bringing him in. Crow took the detective's hand, smirking. It was no trouble. Are you the main detective on this case? Uravati asked as the men parted. Tsukauchi shook his head. Deku and I are here in supporting roles. Echo is a known liar. You could call him a professional at it, and necromancer we're certain is clinically psychotic, so they need my quirk to tell if we're really getting the right answers. He put a hand on Deku's shoulder. Deku is the quirk analyst I work with most often. He's going to be outlining Necromancer's quirk in full details and, hopefully, they'll spill the beans on our mystery murderer who brought down the buildings. Detective Yamato Funai is the main detective on this case, Deku added. All three of us will be in the interrogation room. Very cool, Crow commented, putting his hands on his hips. So, when does the show start? Sukauchi looked at his watch. Soon. Let's get you two situated in the observation room. We'll be interrogating Necromancer first, Sukauchi said as he opened the door to a small room. It was already crowded with people. They were all standing, speaking in hushed tones and darting their eyes towards the two-way mirror. Beyond the mirror was another room, devoid of anything but a metal table and two chairs bolted to the floor. Necromancer sat alone, staring down at the table blankly. Uravati shuddered. The last time she had seen him, he was covered in blood and screaming in Deku's face. Someone had cleaned him up since then and he sat in a new orange jumpsuit. I thought you said he was psychotic. Why question him first? Uravati asked, puzzled. Why question him at all? Crow blurted out and Uravati elbowed him. He's less likely to waste our time with lies and he's already revealed to us he and Echo are brothers, Sukauchi answered. We're hoping to get some definitive information from him so that Echo's interrogation goes a lot faster. Plus, we'll get to hear his side of things. At that moment, the door to the observation room swung open and revealed a few more officers, followed by a stoic man with a perfectly sculpted, white beard. His mouth was invisible underneath the facial hair, but it was his icy blue eyes that commanded attention. Dressed in a black vest over a deep blue tie and matching slacks, Uravati had to guess this was Detective Funai. All right, let's get this show started, Funai said in a tired, gruff voice. All we really know about this bozo is his villain alias, Necromancer. And we know some things about his quirk. I want everyone taking notes. He's got clues in that psychotic head o' his and we're getting him out now, the first damn time. Then, we're getting Echo. Any questions? A few people shook their heads and no one spoke. Good. Sukauchi. Midoriya. In with me. Funai ordered, pointing at a door connecting the two rooms. Yes, sir. Sukauchi and Deku followed him in. Another officer locked the door behind them and everyone's attention turned to the two-way mirror. As the detectives came into the room, Necromancer's head shot up and he braced himself by holding either end of the table in front of him. His eyes were wide, his teeth were clenched, and he began to wail as Funai took his seat across from him. Murderer! Murderer! Sukauchi and Deku stood at the opposite corners of the room behind Funai and they exchanged glances as Necromancer repeated his screams over and over again. Calm yourself, or I'll make you calm down. Funai threatened gently in an even tone that was barely audible over Necromancer's psychotic breakdown. Uravati hoped this didn't become violent and she had to wonder why Necromancer wasn't already handcuffed. You, you, Necromancer tore his hand from the table and pointed at Deku. You, murderer. My friends. Broken. You broke them. Broke them. The room filled with whispering as the onlookers discussed Necromancer's mental state and their doubt that Funai and his team would ever get anything useful out of him. Unlike everyone else in the room, though, Uravati glanced at Deku. To anyone else, it would appear that he was taking the words in stride, letting them flow over his back like water over a duck's feathers. But she could see the hint of regret bubbling to the surface as Necromancer charged him with feathers. But she could see the hint of regret bubbling to the surface as Necromancer charged him with the civilian's second killing. The regret from yesterday was poisoning him again, the shadow growing ever more visible, and now there was nothing she could do to help him. Okay, that's just about enough of that, Funai said flatly. He lifted his left hand, his fingers becoming elongated like noodles and extended towards Necromancer's head. The sudden movement shocked the tiny man into a frozen silence as Funai's fingertips made contact around his skull. A blue light glowed from the detective's palm all the way to those fingertips across the table, and Necromancer immediately calmed down and fell silent. That's better, Funai commented. The name's Detective Funai and I'll be questioning you today. With me is Detective Sukauchi with the ability to tell if someone is lying, and Deku, our quirk analyst. This is how it's going to work. You're going to tell us a little bit about yourself. I can tell you're very troubled and we're going to get you help. Necromancer didn't move. His expression didn't change as Funai retracted his fingers. First question, what's your name? Necromancer's voice was small. My name. Yes. What is it? My name. Necro. What did your mother call you? Genki. All right, Genki, can I call you that? Funai asked, but didn't wait for an answer. Why the hell do you think Deku over there is a murderer? Surely you're aware you were the one reanimating dead bodies yesterday. Surely you know you and your dumbass brother are suspects in a mass murder. Silence. Funai leaned back in his chair and Necro didn't react at all, keeping his eyes trained on the table in front of him. Funai folded his arms and sighed. Genki. Necro stayed quiet. Necro. He looked up. Okay, Necro, tell us why you think he's a murderer. Funai pointed a tired thumb behind him to Deku. From where I'm sitting, someone else killed those people. Someone else. Someone. Yes. Okay, so how could Deku also have murdered them? Necro snarled. He seemed so frustrated at needing to explain something so obvious. I brought them back. Brought them back. I did. And he killed them. Funai nodded slightly and then turned around to look at Sukauchi, who shrugged helplessly. He's telling the truth. That's his reality. Funai turned back around at a loss. Any ideas, Deku? I do, but I don't think he's going to want to talk to me. Try it. All right. Deku sighed and approached, his notebook in hand ready with a pen. Necro, can you tell us about your quirk? Necro glared like a spoiled child but answered. I move bodies. Funai cut in, chuckling. I have a body. Can you move me? Necro wasn't amused and shouted. No, no. The soul must leave the body first. Then, then, then I put my soul in the body. We become friends. They will do things for me for me. Deku nodded and scribbled into his notebook as Necro explained. Uh-huh, like what? They protected me from you. From you, villain. Deku ignored this. Instead he brought the pen to his lip and thought. How do you make your biggest friend? I don't. He is one body. One, one, one. He comes when I need him. One, one, one. Necro trailed off repeating himself. Deku seemed satisfied as he walked back to his corner muttering under his breath as he finished his notes. Funai whipped his head around to follow Deku's back. That's it. Deku straightened, snapped back to reality as his nose became separated from the binding of his notebook. He turned around and shared his analysis. Necromancer is an emitter type. He emits his life energy onto or into the body to reanimate it, like a puppet master pulling the strings on a marionette. That's why he can only control dead things. It seems he can control a huge number of bodies at a time, but he definitely has a limit to the number of separate parts he can control at once, which is why the big zombie eventually falls apart. Deku brought his hand to his chin and kept talking. I was curious how he controlled the huge zombie. I figured that it was a defensive decision, rather than an offensive one, since he has no sensory input while inside it, and he just proved me right. Necro also said it's one body to him, so that means, in his mind's eye, his quirk is an extension of his will, or energy, what he's calling his soul. I imagine that controlling the big zombie or just a bunch of bodies comes with all sorts of pros and cons. He seemed to make his decision solely on what Echo told him and he trusts Echo to guide him when inside the big zombie. It was even at Echo's suggestion that Necro make the big zombie. As threatening as he was yesterday, I don't think Necro can be entirely blamed for yesterday's events. The other men in the opposite room stood flabbergasted at Deku's analysis with such limited data, but Uravati felt a kinship with Tsukauchi and Funai who weren't surprised at all. All three relied on this side of Deku. To the detectives, he was their ace in the hole. To Uravati, he was. One fight and a few questions and you got all that. God damn. Funai was impressed and then turned back to Necro. He brought his hands together in front of him, honestly curious about the deranged man. Necro, are you aware that your quirk doesn't actually bring people back to life? I tried. Uh-huh. I'll ask you again, are you aware you and your brother are complicit in a mass murder? Necro grit his teeth. I don't. I don't. Control. What pyromancer does. I brought them back. Brought them back. They were happy. They were beautiful. And they were destroyed. 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 Uravati heard Crow shift restlessly where he stood and she turned to look at him. Was he uncomfortable? His arms were folded and his face was serious, almost angry. His eyes never parted from Necro as he murmured, "That's not bringing them back. That's nothing like bringing them back." She wanted to question this, but the conversation in the opposite room continued. He really thinks he was the hero that day, Sukauchi commented from his corner, shrugging. Probably best to move on. I don't think we can convince him he did anything wrong. Funai nodded, his arms folded in front of him, his eyes becoming stern again as they locked onto Necro, who was mumbling under his breath repeatedly. Then it should be clear we're dealing with someone who is definitively and without a doubt suffering from quirk-induced psychosis. Let that go on the record. He sighed and stretched. But you're right. It's about time we start asking about our main man, this pyromancer. He must be our guy. Necro stopped muttering and stared at Funai, his eyes becoming wide with fear. Pyromancer is a bad man, bad. Yes, and we're trying to catch him, Funai said gently. You can help us do that by telling us about Pyromancer. Necro stayed quiet though, his eyes darting between the three men before him. It was like he didn't know where to begin. You must be really into the elemental arts, Deku started, his voice friendly, as if he were talking with a child. I mean, you call yourself Necromancer and I'm sure you named this villain Pyromancer. Is that based on his kind of magic? Necro relaxed and focused on Deku. Yes, Pyromancer. Powerful villain. Likes to kill people. Kill. I'll bring them back. Bring them back. Does Pyromancer make fire? Yes. No, yes. No. Necro repeated himself over and over, his voice becoming constricted, his body shaking. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. We're starting to lose him. Funai murmured. Necro, do you have any idea why Pyromancer likes to kill people? Necro ignored him and continued to mutter, clutching both sides of his head as if he were suffering from a terrible headache. Hyperventilating, Necro slammed his forehead onto the table and whimpered as he continued to repeat himself in a frenzy. Funai only sighed as he extended his quirk to the troubled man, calming him with the blue light of his fingertips again. Necro immediately stopped muttering and lay limp. Funai retracted his fingers. This guy's seriously got a screw loose, but I doubt he can fake post-traumatic stress disorder. He's terrified of our guy, or at least what he can do. Sukauchi chimed in, interesting development. Then that means his work with this pyromancer isn't exactly something he wanted. Why would he stick around someone he's so afraid of, though? That's a fantastic question. Let's ask Echo. I bet that bastard is doing it for drugs or money or something. Funai got up from his metal chair, grumbling. A police officer standing next to Uravati jumped to attention, the keys at his side rattling as he fumbled for them to unlock the door. He held it open as Funai, Sukauchi, and Deku came through. Funai addressed the other people in the room with arms crossed, piercing blue eyes commanding attention once again. He waited for a few seconds as everyone got their notes in order. Some of the faces in the room were grim, but they offered no questions to fill the silence. They were all professionals here and had to face some hard truths going forward, namely that Necro wouldn't be able to pay for the heinous things he had done. It occurred to Uravati that most of the people in the room had been hoping for more than what had transpired. She had to agree. In fact, she was hoping that Necromancer would prove to be as diabolical as he appeared to be yesterday, and she was left wondering how to feel about it. If she thought Crow's quirk was a rough one to grow up with, then she could barely imagine Necromancer's struggle. On the other hand, it was difficult to extend sympathy to the tiny man who now rested his head on the metal table. He had certainly attacked them first yesterday, and she gathered that Echo had everything to do with it. She was sure this was running through Funai's head as he nodded, scanned the room once more for an interjection, and led the charge across the hallway to the next interrogation room. Deku hung back with her and Crow, allowing the rest to file out ahead of them. "Well, that was absolutely crazy," Crow commented. "You were right. I learned a lot." Uravati turned to him, shocked he conceded to her. "Oh, thanks. Yeah, I told you. We're not done. Now comes the hard part," Deku informed them. "My guy, you're an absolute unit. If you can figure out Necro's quirk just from that, the bat will be easy." Crow was officially pumped, but Deku shook his head. "Echo is already in the system. We have to get him to tell us as much as he can about Pyromancer's quirk and motives." Deku held the door as Crow walked through. Uravati waited for Deku on the other side so she could walk alongside him. "Didn't Tsukauchi say Echo was like a pathological liar? Aren't you worried he won't talk?" Deku scratched the back of his head worriedly. Well, he's not pathological, he's just not going to give up the truth for free. We'll probably have to negotiate with him, but that's Funai's job. He knows how to handle Echo. This isn't the first time he's come through here, I've been told. I've never seen him before. Yeah, I was looking through his files last night. He's more of a thief and drug dealer than anything, so you probably would have never gotten involved with him if not for this." "I see." Crow held the next door as Uravati and Deku walked into an observation room identical to the one across the hall. They could see Echo through the two-way mirror with his feet propped up on the metal table. His huge, bat-like wings were folded neatly behind him. The tiny claw on each was hooked onto the corresponding shoulder for support. Like Necro, he had been outfitted in a new orange jumpsuit. Echo's long ears twitched as Funai, Sukauchi, and Deku entered the room and a wide toothy grin stretched across his face as the men took their positions. Funai only let out an exasperated sigh and said, "Don't start, Echo. Ah, you're not happy to see me, old man. Not in the slightest. I don't have time to mess around with your special brand of bullshit today, so tell me what I need to know and we can both get on with our lives. State your full name." Who gives a crap? Sukauchi, you get that? Funai twisted in his chair to meet glances with the other detective who nodded. Yes. Don't worry, I can tell he's lying no matter how good he thinks he is at it. Funai turned back around to face Echo and spoke loudly. For our spectators, Echo's real name is Daichi Nagasawa, middle 20s. His quirk is called Bat, in which he possesses abilities akin to a bat, such as flight, echolocation, and superhuman hearing. And despite all of these wonderful talents, he's still a drug dealing hooligan who is now wrapped up in a mass murder case with his psychotic brother Genki Nagasawa. Did I miss anything, Daichi? Echo's grin disappeared. You guys questioned my brother first. We did. Funai folded his hands in front of him, leaning forward with a grin of his own. Necro had been the bartering chip and Echo had no choice but to pay. Your brother needs some serious help, Daichi, but he's revealed a lot to us that puts you in even more trouble. I'd like it very much if you were straight with me from the get-go and we can see about getting your brother the support he needs. Lie to me too many times, and you can kiss that shit goodbye. Do I make myself clear? Echo didn't answer, his onyx black eyes only squinting in silent rage at being bested already. Funai took this as an agreement. We'll also have to discuss your attempted murders of heroes Deku, Uravati, and Crow, but that will come later. For now, get your damn feet off the table and tell me a little bit about this pyromancer fellow. Your brother is scared shitless of him. Echo dropped his shackled feet to the floor. I have no problem ratting that guy out. What do you want to know about him? Funai's brow furrowed in distrust. His motive, his operation. Bringing down big buildings is flashy as hell and yet we haven't gotten anything on him. Echo sneered. That's 'cause you know jack shit about him. You think Pyro only goes for the big buildings. Nah. Pyro hits low key, too. And you know this how? Well, it's how we met. I brought Necro down to one of the drug dens the Yakuza was heading up some months ago. I supplied them with some shit, dragged Necro to the toilet for a whiz, everything was cool. The minute we get out, the whole place is a smoldering war zone and there's Pyro just standing there looking over his handiwork. Yakuza, hoes, first time hitters, everyone burnt to a crisp. I was like, damn. But Necro gets upset and starts reanimating people and using them to attack Pyro, but the man is a machine, ya know. Necro even makes the huge zombie, he's so freaked out. Pyro backs down, he's all impressed and shit. I get Necro to stop, and instead of cooking us, Pyro enlists me to help him find good buildings to crumble. But it was like being threatened at gunpoint, ya know what I'm saying. That's why Necro is scared. I'm sure there was more groveling and negotiating on your part, but fine. That doesn't explain why you stuck around yesterday and attempted to murder Deku, Uravati, and Crow. Necro got scared, went off the deep end. I just helped him. I wasn't about to leave him to get thrown in the slammer all by himself. That isn't the whole truth, Echo, but we'll have to come back to that later. Sukauchi spoke up and approached the table. Funai shook his head in disappointment at the bat. If you worked closely with Pyromancer, then you must know what he looks like. Yeah, he's a giant, old man. American. Gives a crap about nothing, Echo summarized leaning back in his chair. He plays the part of a tourist really well. Got a big old camera with him sometimes, some pretty cool shades. He splits from the building collapses as soon as those bombs he uses goes off. I wouldn't doubt that some dumbass hero escorted him to safety yesterday, and last week, and last month. Echo cackled at the thought and Funai grumbled. Who planted the bombs, Echo? The bat's smile disappeared and his eyes wandered away from Funai's icy glare. He had almost forgotten he wasn't in charge. Don't lie to us, Echo. Funai warned, and the bat was quick to answer. We did. Necro did, and I told him to because that's what Pyro wanted. We slipped them in attached to the backs of dead rats, or I'd pretend to be looking for an apartment in a target building and plant them. And how do these bombs get set off? I really don't know. There's no, timer or anything on them. Funai checked with Sukauchi on that who nodded in response. He turned back around to face Echo, his arms now folded in frustration. He motioned for Deku to approach. Perhaps, you can enlighten us on his quirk, then. Echo grit his teeth at Deku, who only turned to a new page in his notebook nonchalantly. Is it proper police etiquette to have the heroes who brought us in also interrogate us? Is that not police brutality? Calm yourself, Echo. Funai warned. No, no. I just wanna know. Is that crow bastard here, too? Behind the glass. Tell him I'll kick his ass next time. Crow giggled, a tiny snort escaping his nose. Guy's salty as fuck. Uravati could only shake her head as she turned back to the mirror. Focus, Echo. Deku is a quirk analyst with the police department and his encounters with villains are instrumental to our cases. You will answer him as you would me with the truth and nothing but the truth. Funai's voice had become even more stern and the bat seemed to understand he was in no position to drag the argument on further. Echo stared with contempt at Deku, who, to Uravati's surprise, stood unwavering. Perhaps it was because the bat-like villain was a proper villain. It was easier to ignore his judgmental eyes than it was Necromancer's cries. Necro wasn't able to confirm or deny that Pyromancer creates fire. Can you? Deku asked. Echo clenched his teeth, but reluctantly decided to answer. It's not a straight answer, that's why, and you'll have to excuse me if I don't give you all the answers. He raised his voice while glaring at Sukauchi, then turned back to Deku. I wouldn't say he can create fire whenever he likes, like Endeavor or his brat Shoto or that bastard Dabi. but he can create it when there's, I guess, already a source of heat around. He does his big jobs in the summer when there's a lot of heat to work with, and his small jobs, like the Yakuza den, in the winter. The small shit, he makes it look like an accident. Deku scratched his chin in thought and Echo seemed to take it as if the green-clad hero didn't understand him. Look, man, I don't understand all the science behind it, that's your job. All I know is that guy makes shit explode, and melt, and cook, and sometimes he can light a fire out of thin air. How does he do it? I don't know. That seems to be all he knows, Tsukauchi confirmed and Deku nodded. No, that really helps. The bat rolled his eyes. Great. Good. I'm glad I was such a big fucking help. Ya know, now that the fight and shit is all over the news, you've put a big target on my back. He knows I'd snitch. I can't tell you how absolutely grateful I am to go to jail. Are you telling us that even another villain knows you're a big pile o' crap? Funai squinted at Echo. Echo laughed loudly, his shoulders bouncing. Before we go, I have a hunch that your staying to fight us yesterday didn't really have anything to do with Necro, Deku said sternly, his green eyes becoming fierce. It was a strange look for Deku outside of battle, and Uravati felt the tenseness grab hold of her. The bat reacted accordingly, frowning and arching an eyebrow. He said cautiously, yeah. What makes you say that? Just 'cause that guy over there said so. Maybe I just left out a detail or two. You didn't really seem to care that your brother was terrified of us, and you also don't really seem to care that he's afraid of Pyromancer. In fact, all you did was use him like a tool to try and murder us. I think you made him believe heroes and villains were interchangeable. Well, they are. Echo became dangerous, leaning forward. He slammed his hands on the table. And I'll have you know I've been babysitting that punk longer than you've been out of school. Deku, don't assume shit about me. Deku didn't flinch. Who is Pyromancer targeting? He ain't targeting shit. He just kills whoever the fuck he likes. Answer truthfully, Echo. Funai didn't even have to turn around to look at Tsukauchi. Do not forget what I said. Echo sneered. You wouldn't let Necro slip through the cracks. How do you use someone so sick and weak as your shield? Deku asked, his softer, caring side bleeding through his solid exterior. Echo, if you dodge the question one more time, you're getting nothing from me. I will personally see to it you get no parole, Funai said evenly, his steely resolve not cracking in the slightest. This is what scared Echo and made him put his hands up. Okay, fine. Fine. Look, I'm not wrong. He doesn't usually target anyone. He just kills whoever, civilian, villain, common crook, kids, he don't care. But, the sentence trailed as the bat's signature grin slid back on his face. He really likes to snuff out heroes. Brand new sidekicks. Whoever the hell attempts to save people out of his murder sprees. Seems to get him off. So, he's targeting Uravati, Deku said flatly, as if he had already come to this conclusion. Across the glass, everyone in the adjacent room couldn't help but whip their heads around to witness Uravity's reaction to this bombshell. Eyes wide, Uravity could feel all the terror from yesterday suddenly manifest itself in the pit of her stomach as a sickly helplessness. Oh, Echo was impressed, unable to see the concern through Deku's agitation. This guy is good. You should give him a promotion or something. Yeah, we were told, if there was an opportunity, that we should take her out. He didn't think he'd need to do it on his own. As Echo laid out his execution orders against her, Uravity's mind dissolved into paranoia. She lived in an apartment building, and although hers had no storefront, it was clear to her that Pyromancer didn't adhere to any hard and fast rules like they originally thought. According to Echo, Pyromancer could and would hit anything he wanted. The lack of a grocer in front of her apartment was not a hindrance. Did they know where she lived? Had Echo been to her apartment without her knowing? The collapse yesterday was not too far away from where she lived. The change in the city skyline from her 17th floor balcony had been noticeable last night, to say the least. She took a deep breath, knowing Crow and the rest of the officers were waiting for a response from her. She refused to give them one. Despite fear being the correct reaction to this development, Uravity was certain this was something heroes faced often enough. Funai chimed in, and I doubt Uravity is the only one. And I also doubt Pyromancer is lost without you now. Are there other buildings you have set up for him? Sure. As long as you can guarantee Necro will be okay, I'll give you the whole list, Echo said, putting his feet back on the table much to Funai's ire. He glared at Deku. Despite what you think, hero, I do give a damn about my brother. But I wasn't about to put him in more danger by disobeying this guy. You have no idea what you're up against. Ya can't imagine what he's capable of. It doesn't matter what we're up against, Funai said as he got up from his chair, waving away Echo's ominous warning. We need to catch this guy. That's all. He motioned for Sukauchi and Deku to follow him out, leaving Echo to shrug. The small-time villain didn't watch them leave, his eyes glued to the floor. The solemn look on his face was an indicator that he knew full well he'd be in jail for a lot longer than he ever had been before, and he had accepted it. The door clicked behind Funai as he shut it, looking around the room and then at Uravity. She kept on a brave face. Whether or not Echo and Pyromancer had been outside her door at some point over the past few weeks made no difference right now. What was done was done. At the back of her mind, though, she was rattled, and began thinking about where she would sleep until they caught the fiery madman. It was too dangerous to return home. She could look as brave as she wanted, but facts were facts. We'll let Echo rest for a few hours, then we'll be back in to get as much of Pyromancer's hit list from him as humanly possible. I doubt he remembers everything, but lucky for us, he and Pyromancer were not exactly friends. We learned a lot, really made some headway, Funai summarized for the spectators. He brought his hands to his hips, the pressure to catch Pyromancer clearly making the wrinkles in his face deeper. He sighed. Anyway, let's break. There's still much to do and no time to do it. At that, the spectators dispersed out of the room, leaving Uravati to ponder her current predicament with Crow, Deku, and Sukauchi. The latter came up to her gently, putting his hand on her shoulder in support, his face grim but hopeful. Everything is going to be okay, the detective said. If a villain hates you, it just means you're doing your job right. Uravati gave him a weak smile. Thanks. But considering he likes to take down apartment buildings. Of course. Feel free to stay here at the station or call a friend and stay with them until this all blows over. We'll have to confirm with Echo if your place is even on Pyromancer's list. I suppose you're right. Yeah, but, dude, how could you even think she was a target? Crow cocked his head to the side, his questioning gaze pointed to Deku, who was happy to explain. Well, I figured Echo could have easily escaped yesterday with Necromancer. We wouldn't have known any better, but he made the decision to stay despite being outnumbered. He could not have been targeting you or me because we hadn't responded to a building collapse yet. That left Uravati who had been to everyone so far. But why would the big man give that kind of order? And why wouldn't Echo just lie about it? Say he didn't see us and fly away with Necro. Crow lifted his arms in a shrug. Uravati had to admit she was impressed with Crow. Sometimes he made outlandish remarks, sometimes his dark humor superseded his analytical thinking, but it seemed his want to learn trumped all of that. He asked any question and said whatever was on his mind as if the repercussions never occurred to him. They probably didn't. Sukauchi and Deku both smiled at these questions, but it was the former who spoke first. Now you're thinking like a detective. Deku followed the sentiment by nodding. Great questions. If you remember all the things Echo said, you'll see he answered them all on his own. He cares for his brother's well-being. He doesn't want to admit it, but he's also scared of Pyromancer. He was stuck between a rock and hard place and decided that jail was the best escape. Well, he didn't have to fight so damn hard. Crow murmured. The group exited the room and walked down the hall to join in the main homicide office. Things had calmed down greatly since earlier that morning. It was emptier. Sukauchi parted from the group to meet up with Funai. His job today wouldn't be finished until the bat gave up every address and every name he could recall from Pyromancer's lists. Who knew how long those lists were? Who could guess what was really on them? Uravati already knew she was one, the thought sticking to the forefront of her brain, oozing into her thoughts like a nasty syrup. The returning thought that Echo had probably lurked just outside her apartment door made her skin crawl. At work, she was formidable Uravati who saw these things coming. At home, she was plain old Ochako who wrongly assumed her bedroom was a safe space. Crow's voice penetrated through her mind, chasing the intrusive thoughts away. Despite the danger his direct supervisor was in, he wore his usual, playful smirk. Well, I'm out of here, gang. You're leaving. You can stay to go over the case with us, Uravati reminded him. The crow-like hero had already considered that as he shrugged. It's Saturday, my dudes. I still have summer assignments and relaxing to do. I gotta recharge. I'll see you two on Monday, bright and early. Uravati sighed, but it couldn't be helped. It was already amazing he had pulled himself out of bed this morning to be here when it wasn't mandatory. Okay, then, let me walk you back to the office. Hold on, Uraraka. Deku stopped her as she joined Crow near the elevator. She turned around to meet his gaze, the worry unveiled in his frown. She knew he was having a hard time with this as well. Her being a target was new to them both. During their first year, Bakugo had been the target of a League of Villains operation, but at least they hadn't wanted to kill their target. This was different. Someone wanted her dead and he had more than the means to do it, but she was a hero. Every twist and turn in her professional life going forward was going to be rife with danger. Deku knew that. They shared a deep respect for each other, one that fostered a firm belief the other was capable, dependable, and independent. They weren't a weakling that needed supervision. However, there was a primal drive to worry regardless. Here was someone they couldn't lose. All of this was easily legible in his eyes. Answering this gaze was difficult. Had the roles been reversed, nothing would change. She would be just as uncomfortable with the whole thing as he was now. Her spirit had to break through the doubt, so she smiled as if she weren't scared. It's a very short walk. I'll be fine for the 15 minutes there and back. Don't worry. Are you sure? I don't think anyone will mind if I join you. I'm sure. Besides, I need to talk to Crow about yesterday and today. See what he's learned. I can't have you there giving him all the answers. She was coming up with this on the spot. She couldn't drag Deku away from his work, even if his intentions were sweet and expected. Her bubbly confidence eased his distress, and replaced it with an assured smile. All right, then. Meet me back here. Will do. The elevator pinged as the doors opened. Crow said nothing as he walked in and Uravati followed, the two of them waving goodbye to Deku as the doors closed shut. As they descended, Uravati found herself in a bit of a pickle. She had inadvertently promised a pop quiz or a discussion with her intern on their way back while trying to assuage Deku's anxiousness, when in reality she had nothing prepared. If she didn't think of something, Crow would immediately know she was fibbing for Deku's sake. The impending torment loomed ever closer as they gently landed at the bottom floor and the elevator pinged. This was fine, though. It was just a discussion. She could ask him anything to get a dialogue going. She pushed the doors to the police station open and started the show. So what did you think? It was innocent enough, pointed, direct enough to begin going over the case and the benefits of joining the police in their interrogations. One could learn so much about the villains they fight. Yes, she could feel it now. Iida was successfully channeled. Crow took a minute to respond, gathering his thoughts as he squeezed his chin, looking up at the buildings. Then he smirked, and Uravati knew she was done for. I think I'll be lucky if I find someone who looks at me like that. He was picking on her again. She just knew it, and it left her fumbling as dumbfounded Ochako. She had to assume her conversation with Deku just a few minutes ago had spurred this. Perhaps her eyes still revealed all of the longing she felt when alone with her thoughts about him, even when she was supposed to be Uravati. Ochako never could hide her feelings well, but she thought she had at least gotten somewhat better at it over the years Deku had been absent. She sputtered her response and sealed her fate. We were just friends. Crow's grin couldn't be wider as he threw his head back and covered his eyes in peak amusement. He wheezed, attempting to rein in a full-on laugh. Please, oh please. I can't even with this. Ochako huffed and crossed her arms. Had she blown her own cover? Or did Crow know from day one when he had suggested they were already an item? She refused to say anything else on the topic. We're supposed to be going over what you learned today, and here you are being ridiculous again. He took a deep breath, calming himself. We both know you only said that so he wouldn't worry, but he's gonna anyway. Have you noticed I only do this to you when he's not around? I'm trying to be your friend here. Poking fun at me isn't what good friends do. Telling you to confess is also boring as fuck. Toru and Mina ran through her mind, their giggles echoing off of the deep, dark chasm she found herself in. Yet another person knew. She was too obvious for her own good. She was at a loss. At this rate, she wondered how long it would be before the media took a crack at it. Crow lifted up an index finger as if he were the teacher now and continued. I'm going to ask you a question, and I really want you to think about it. What do you get out of hiding your feelings for him? Honestly, I'm sure you've come up with all these great reasons not to say anything, but what are they good for? Ochako didn't answer that question, although it stung. My personal life isn't really part of your training, Crow. They stopped in front of the UQ offices, the sunlight steadily becoming a deadly laser. Once again, his philosophical questions irked her and she found that she couldn't answer it right now even if she broke down the barrier between student and teacher and confided in him all of her woes concerning this issue. It was as relevant to both her dual lives as his question about the truth earlier that week. On his first day, he probably hadn't realized how often she exchanged the truth for convenience, or how much it had become a habit. Transparency was in her nature. Her perpetually rosy cheeks and the fact that she was never prepared when faced with the truth, just like now, was evidence enough. In fact, the first thing she had ever denied in her life was her love for Izuku. The ugly addiction to the excuses and escapes to stressful things only snowballed from there. It was easier. That was the answer. It was easier to let Uravity's bravery and focus on heroics take over when Ochako's silly feelings became too forlorn. But what did she get out of it, besides the status quo? Was there anything positive to staying this way? She had never thought about it, it was the selfless thing to do. That's all, but was all this pain really that easy? That was the real question here. You're right, Crow said, putting up his hands, conceding to her point. Just think about it, please. He then walked up the front steps and went inside, leaving Ochako to fret over his question as she collected a change of clothes and walked all the way back to the police station by herself. It wasn't until she reached the elevator and pushed the button for the 8th floor that she questioned Crow's position. Why was he so interested in this? Everyone else had their reasons, or they watched it play out, but not Crow. His pleas had sounded desperate. Was he coming from a place of experience? It certainly seemed like he did. His question was so beyond what she had ever considered in the years this crush lingered. She had always viewed the crush itself as a distraction. In her mind, it threatened her relationship with Izuku and it also threatened her personally. No one likes getting rejected, especially when they were in this deep. However, she never considered that perhaps all of that distraction came from her own inaction. When Ochako meandered over to where Deku was sitting in a cubicle of his own, he looked up at her in concern. It wasn't like before when he was fearing for her life. It was more tender. He just knew something was wrong internally as his eyes met hers, dark and lost. Are you okay? Deku prompted her. Ochako shook her head and smiled. She wouldn't let Crow's words dig into her, not when there was a case to be solved and a villain to be captured. She swept it all under the rug. Uravati had a job to do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm fine, Uravati said, taking a seat in the chair opposite of him. The heat is unbearable out there. That's all. Okay. She could tell he didn't buy it, but moved on. He was too respectful of her to pry anymore. As with most things in their past, all he had to do was wait and she'd eventually come around and talk. He didn't need to remind her he was always there for her. That was a given. So, he half smiled and lowered his gaze back down to the paper in front of him. The desk between them was littered with documents from neighboring hero agencies. Their experiences at the apartment building collapses had been given to Deku in case the UQ office had missed something. Unfortunately, they didn't seem to be adding anything new to what Deku already knew. and a stack of folders lay at his right, opposite the computer monitor and keyboard as his designated, done, pile. His face was contorted in stress, and Uravati watched his eyes quickly scan each document as he muttered, hunting for something enlightening. There was nothing. Are you okay? Uravati asked him. She felt silly asking this, since she hadn't been entirely truthful when he had asked, not to mention it was clear what was bugging him. He could know everything about pyromancer and yet the man was still out there, free to murder anyone he liked, including Uravati herself. I'll be okay, was his solemn answer. Tell me how I can help. I'm here all day. It's just that something Echo said bothered me. He peered up from the file. Uneasiness had seeped into his demeanor and mixed with the worry she had seen before walking Crow back to the office. His eyes darted away from her, the trouble only building. His first meeting with Pyromancer was deemed an accident by the police. I looked it up while you were gone. How many other, smaller crimes like that has he committed? There are plenty of arson and fire incidents in our records for this year and most are closed cases. How do we know which ones are from Pyromancer in actuality? I should have known bringing down big buildings wasn't the only thing he would do, not with his first case we have on file from Alaska. That was such an oversight. The pressure to catch Pyromancer was clear on Deku's face, and he relieved some of the tension with a heavy-hearted sigh. Uravati could only listen as Deku went on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to unload all of this on you. That's okay. What are friends for? Uravati reminded him. He took the invitation to continue, frustration lacing each word. Yeah, it's just, every time I learn something about him and I feel like I understand what's going on, all of a sudden there's a brand new angle to him. He's perpetually shrouded in mystery and people keep dying because we can't figure him out. Deku covered his mouth in thought, his brow furrowing. It's like he's not motivated by anything. Maybe he's trying to tell us something. I suppose. But killing indiscriminately. He shrugged, his face scrunched in doubt. If that's true, then he's making it very difficult to follow. At least with Stain and the like, they had certain targets. This guy doesn't, save for the heroes that get in his way too often. He sighed again, distraught, staring at the files before him. This is the toughest case I've ever been on by now, we'd at least have a working hypothesis. She wanted to hug him, squeeze all of his insecurities out. She had done it once or twice before in high school when he would get overwhelmed. Anthills suddenly looked like mountains, and he needed to be grounded, something only a warm touch could solve. Now, however, she kept herself planted in her seat. They were still close, but the time apart before this whole fiasco made the thought of touching him at all seem wildly inappropriate. She would have to save him with her words again. Don't let it psych you out, Deku, Uravati said softly. Deku slowly brought his head up to face her, the worry already crumbling away. I don't think you need every single crime he's committed. From where I'm standing, you have his quirk pretty much figured out. And don't forget, he's been doing this a long time. He's never been caught. His MO has been stumping police in at least 2 countries now for 50 years. Don't beat yourself up that you haven't figured it out in a week. The next sigh that escaped him was one of relief. A weak smile lit up his face and Uravati dissolved into Ochako for a moment to relish in its radiance. How simple it was for her to pick him up where he faltered. She would do it whenever and wherever he needed it if she could keep him grounded. Then his saving the world was something she could take credit in, too. She only wished she could do the same for Flashlight, for Crow. The rest of the day was spent agonizing over case files, these including witness testimony from Pyromancer's recent crimes. Uravati had been able to convince Deku that they need not pore over old arson records. For the most part, Pyromancer's quirk was as detailed as they could muster without ever having met the man. It came to pass that both Funai and Tsukauchi agreed that this was as good as it was going to get. When they interviewed Echo again for the hit lists, the Bat was more than willing to cooperate, after so many hours to think about it. Echo gave them as detailed a list as he could, and just as they feared, Ochako's apartment building was on the list. However, the list also threw an official wrench into any working hypothesis the team had come up with. He's changing up his routine. It's to mess with you guys, really, Echo said in passing as he finished off the building list. He pointed to 2 office building addresses, one being Yukyu's office, for obvious reasons, and the other still under construction. Uravati saw the frustration on Deku's face. While in Japan, Pyromancer had only hit apartment buildings. In fact, he hadn't attacked an office building in many years, and yet, here they were, in his future demolition plans. Explains why he's so hard to track. All of these are seemingly random, Funai commented as he read down the list. But, we can at least warn the residents and the landlords of these locations. He probably won't go after them now if you're gonna remove his groundwork, ya know. But, let me be really frickin' clear to you guys, Echo said, his arms crossed and feet on the table. I don't mean to be pun-why, but he just likes to watch the world burn. It didn't seem to me that there was any other reason he does this. He never said anything to me, but, I'm telling you now. If you go after him, people are gonna die. He don't go easy. He don't play. It's a swift operation. We get it, Echo. He's a smooth criminal and his operation is so well thought out that your low-ranked ass can't wrap your head around it, Funai quipped and Echo grumbled. Sucks when the person you're talking to is an asshole, huh? Get it all in now, old man. Next time we talk, I ain't gonna be this easy, Echo promised. By the end of the day, Uravati could see a marked improvement in Deku's attitude. He seemed confident as he wrote up his reports into the computer, detailing Necro's and Pyromancer's quirks. Although there wasn't much for her to do now, Uravati stayed poised in the conference seat across from him, sharing a pot of tea and acting as a sounding board for his muttering. Despite all the jarring news they had received today, there was an air of peace right here. Right now that Uravati indulged in watching Deku so engrossed in his element was a treat. He was incredible on the battlefield, everyone knew that. Not many knew this side to him, this incessant thinker that even seasoned detectives begged to slow down. To think she was getting paid to do this. She would have done it for free. There was a knock on the wood frame of his cubicle, and Funai appeared, a jacket thrown over his shoulder. His icy eyes were soft now, no doubt thankful to have such a busy bee as Deku on his team. Nevertheless, the gruffness in the detective's voice was present as he spoke gently. It's after 5, son. Go home. I will once these are done. Funai stared hopelessly for a beat before shattering the piece in the cubicle. Or better yet, why not take the lady out for some dinner? She's been here all day on overtime, for Christ's sake. That stopped Deku's typing. Uravati abandoned Ochako, leaving her there to blush and stare at the floor. The detective didn't seem to notice and didn't respond to the obvious discomfort. They say the heat's gonna break a little tonight, he said as he walked away. Just a suggestion. The elevator pinged and he was gone. Ochako placed her cup back on its saucer and got up from her chair to stretch the embarrassment away. When she did, she noticed the office was almost barren. The night shift had come in as the sun's orange rays filtered through the big windows. It was the height of summer, so it would be a while before the sun finally left for the day, but its brightness had certainly dimmed to the benefit of the city. He's right, she heard Izuku say as he stood as well. I can finish this in the morning. They had been sitting for the last few hours, and she heard his joints crack as he stretched. Her eyes traced the outline of his body, his hero costume only leaving some things a mystery. And to think she was still on the clock for this. When she noticed she couldn't summon Uravati back, she looked away at the cubicle door frame, anything to chase those thoughts away. What do you mean by that? She asked shakily, her cheeks heating up. She heard papers rustling and looked back to see he was cleaning up the work area, trying to ensure the files were returned to the proper folders. Well, it's been about a week, and we still haven't done lunch yet. Yeah, that's true, Ochako lingered. She had almost forgotten. With all of the serious calls, training and struggling with Crow, the building collapse, fighting literal zombies, and finding out a wanted criminal wanted her head, the simple want to catch up with her estranged friend had been pushed to the wayside. She sighed as she realized how incredibly easy it had been to forget all about their lunch date, even when he had been so close. He dealt with this sort of workload and stress all the time. It was no wonder he hadn't called her back over the last 2 years. Suddenly, it all made sense, more than before. Here he was trying, though. He had remembered when she hadn't, and was making every effort to follow through. At this rate, it's probably not going to happen. There's just too much going on in the day, he said, becoming flustered just like that night on the balcony. And, well, if you're not busy tonight, we might as well just do dinner, right? Ah, Yes, just dinner. It was just food. Right. No need to assume it was a date of any kind. A dinner between colleagues. A dinner between friends. She was so glad Crow had gone home. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that then, she answered against her internal screaming. She turned away from him to aid in calming herself down. I heard there was a new ramen shop that opened a few blocks from here. I pass it all the time on my patrols. Sounds good. We can walk there, Deku said as he passed her. The station has separate locker rooms, if you're okay changing here. Yup, Ochako said as she held up the small duffel bag she had brought from the UQ office earlier. Once changed, the duo left the police station and walked down the street, their conversation starting immediately. It was just like old times, when the words and the laughter came as easily as the ocean breeze that swept along the street. The sun's heat had died down considerably, and so its rays only cast the orange glow of evening in the city. Cars whizzed by and people passed them, but all that existed was the other person. This was nice. Better yet, their conversation didn't revolve around the current case. No, it spanned throughout the 2 years they spent apart. It was the conversation that should have been had on Momo's balcony. Ochako and Izuku weaved tales of glory and triumph over villainy. The things they'd seen, the people they got to work with, the close calls, the praise, the challenges, it was all very exciting. Neither let up for a moment. They had me train for a whole month for this position, Izuku said. I got out of school with you guys and then went right back in. To be a quirk analyst. Yeah. But, did you show them your notebooks? Izuku laughed. I should have. But I'm glad I went. I learned so much more about quirks in much more detail than we did in school. Is that how you figured out Necro's quirk so quickly? They stopped at an intersection, the crosswalk signage of blaring red across the street. Sort of, it certainly helped. What's the coolest thing you learned? Like, something we didn't learn in class. Ochako asked, honestly intrigued. She thought she saw him blush at the attention. Well, they really got into how emitter-type quirks work and how a lot of them are just a movement of energy, Izuku began, but noticed he had already lost Ochako. Okay, a great example would be Nijire's quirk wave motion. She takes her own life energy and produces waves with it for Kaminari. His quirk is just a discharge of his own electrical energy. For Necro, well, I explained that before. Does that make sense? The crosswalk signaled for everyone to cross and they followed the pack across the street. Ochako nodded. That is really fascinating. Yeah, but there was a point to that lesson. Izuku grew a little more serious. Emitters can die from their quirk usage pretty easily. And I never thought of that before. Like, with your quirk. You eventually get all the signs to stop using it. You mean by my weight limit? Yeah, you start feeling sick from overuse. But there are some people who don't have a hard stop like that. There have been a few times where we were called to a crime scene where someone was just dead in their apartment. No obvious break in or anything. It's happened twice since I've been on the force. That's so odd. I mean, after working with Nijire for so long, I just assumed anyone using their own life energy to use their quirk just made more like she does. I did, too. But, in reality, she's just really lucky she can do that. You too. My mom, also. You both expend energy, but you also bring it back to yourself when you're done. I don't think you'll ever be in any true danger from using your quirk, Uraraka. That's a relief. Now, I just need to make sure I don't float myself into the stratosphere and you'll be right. They both laughed. Izuku spoke next. It's the reason why Pyromancer's quirk has been bothering me. He is clearly an emitter, but his range and power is just unprecedented. I wonder if he gets tired from using it on an entire building. Could explain why he only attacks one building at a time. He must be using his own energy to attract the heat and then go from there. Heat is just energy in itself, right? Izuku was impressed. That's a really great point. I remember a few things from science class. Wasn't that the test we studied for together? Kinetic and potential energy. Oh, is that why I remember so much of it? Was this flirting? Ochako wasn't sure. If it was, she and Izuku had been flirting for years. The thought wiggled out of her mind as quickly as it had wiggled in, just a reminder to her what was really going on here. It offered her a warm sense of happiness and her cheeks grew redder. As she looked ahead, she could see the ramen shop just a few stores down. The corner restaurant was an old-style ramen bar, with seating outside as stools lined up against the wooden bar. Wide, red pieces of curtain lined along the edge behind seated patrons, shielding them from the bright, fiery glow of the setting sun and the passerby walking along the sidewalk. Despite the grand opening banner hung overhead, there were still some seats open next to each other, right at the very end at the edge of the restaurant. Izuku offered Ochako the first seat and then sat between her and another patron. A laminated menu was already in front of them both and they picked each up in unison. Everything looked so delicious and the scent of spices and broth filled her nostrils. She hadn't noticed how hungry she really was. Deku, let's not forget to tell the waiter to split the check. I always forget when I go out with Sue, Ochako said as she looked over the menu. Izuku looked at her confused. Okay, but why? Ochako also became confused. Well, I thought it might make things easier, but I can pay you back if that's how you want to do it. Oh, no, Uraraka, I got it. He turned back to the menu, his decision final. It left Ochako feeling flustered. She was certain this was just an outing among friends, but if he was going to pay for everything. Are you sure, Deku? He smiled sweetly at her, but wasn't given a chance to answer. The patron sitting next to him butted in on their conversation. Deku. Like the hero, Deku. Came a guttural voice from Izuku's left where a large man was seated. He spoke in perfect Japanese, but the inflection and accent almost made him difficult to understand. A tiny sake cup was lost in his huge hands, and he took a sip. This wasn't a fan, and something in Ochako turned inside out as an awful feeling slowly took hold of her. Something was wrong. Izuku seemed to agree with this feeling as his face turned sharp and the pace of his breathing became more deliberate. He slowly turned so that he was facing forward so as not to bring too much attention to the situation, but Ochako looked straight up at the man. His snow-white hair was kept out of his face by a pair of welding goggles, but this feature was all that made him stand out from the crowd, save for the fact that he wasn't Japanese. The sleeves to his long, dark brown jacket were rolled up, the dark stains therein on his similarly colored gloves reminded Ochako of the soot that had been in Izuku's hero costume yesterday. "Well, are you gonna answer me?" the man asked. "I want to know if I'm really this lucky." "Should I know you?" was Izuku's answer, and suddenly Ochako felt like she was back in the observation room watching Deku interrogate. Unfortunately, Necro and Echo had nothing on this guy's presence, and it made all the sense in the world why the two of them were so scared of him. A wide grin stretched and folded the stubbled wrinkles of his cheeks. "Your girlfriend over there is a real fan of my work. She comes to every show," the man continued, snickering at his own joke. "I could have put on a special show for her, but you and a little birdie took my roadies." Izuku became even more tense and leaned forward in a way that placed him squarely and defensively between the man and Ochako. He reached slowly for his cell phone in his pocket, but the man snapped at him in a dangerously low voice. "God forbid you call anyone, make any noise, I swear I will blow this place to smithereens." "Then I guess that makes you pyromancer," Izuku said in an equally low tone. Although Ochako had suspected as much, hearing Izuku say it out loud made the nightmare all the more real. "Is that what they're calling me these days? See, in America, they called me Demolition, but you can call me whatever the hell you like. I've never been one for names." "What do you want?" Izuku asked firmly, and Pyromancer only chuckled a bit more as he poured more hot sake into his cup. "I just wanna talk. I've heard that before. Other villains like talking to you. Interesting. Probably because you're not really all that threatening up close." Pyromancer chuckled again. Izuku took no offense. Rather, Ochako could see he was looking for an escape, some way to put out this runaway fire. There wasn't one. It's good to become acquainted before we inevitably kill each other. Although, I know everything I care to about you already. I have to tell you, you two have really pissed me off. Just let me do my work and I'll spare you. We're heroes. If you think for a second we'll let you get away with what you've done, you're dead wrong. Izuku's voice was even intense, but Ochako could hear the building fear in it as he struggled to find an exit. Their entrapment was getting more real by the second. Pyromancer snorted as he brought the sake to his lips and took a swig. "You really think you're saving anyone?" Why don't you look at the big picture? You barely consider who you're saving. The thief, the child molester, the wife beater. You save a man who could be someone else's living nightmare. A drain on society, a piece of shit who has no business passing on his pointless genes. Let people die. It's just nature taking its course. It's how evolution works, and the human race has been stagnated by heroes constantly protecting people who bring nothing to the table. Saving useless people, quirkless people, dangerous people, that's not helping humanity. It doesn't serve any long term purpose. I'll have to disagree. Figured you would. Pyromancer shrugged his huge shoulders. All the heroes I eventually kill are always so sure their worldview is the right one even though it's so small. That's fine. They squared up against me, and their quirk wasn't better than mine. So, they died. No American hero has been able to beat your heat transfer. That's a good name for it, heat transfer. Maybe you know more about me than I thought. Guess I'm getting rusty. Pyromancer seemed so cool and collected as he genuinely smirked. He wasn't intending to be intimidating. He also didn't seem too convinced in his own statement. Something in Ochako made her believe he intended for them to catch Echo and Necra. To be able to wield heat energy any way I want has been useful in challenging people to save themselves. Plenty of people have survived my disasters and I commend them. For those that haven't, well, no loss. That's really despicable. Ochako grit her teeth. What sort of man commits the kind of crimes Pyromancer has committed? She should have known it was one with an ideology. Who was worth saving? She had never considered it. The question fell out of the scope of her work. It wasn't her job to save people from themselves. Think what you like, little lady. Pyromancer had so many years to convince himself what he was doing was right. He thought himself a natural disaster, something only the fittest would or should survive. Those with the best traits and quirks went on to reproduce. However, it seemed somewhere along his destructive journey, fewer and fewer people deserved to make the cut. Somehow, to Pyromancer, his two recent associates had quirks that earned them a check mark in his book. It was the only way to explain their survival to this point. Pyromancer took another swig from his cup, staring ahead. His cold, black eyes were squinted as he watched the waiters dote on their patrons. Everyone was so unaware of the danger sitting right there at the edge of the restaurant, and there was no way to reach them. Either one of you ever been to Alaska? Can't say I have. Izuku answered quickly. Pyromancer sat up straight and Izuku kept in line with him. It's beautiful. Just a short jump over the ocean. One of the last real wildernesses of our world. Pristine. I used to live there. Born and raised. But even people there are held to each other and the place they call home. Like cockroaches. Is that why you scorched the entire town? I did. Never looked back. And nobody was worse for it. Why come here, then? Aren't there more American towns to hit? Pyromancer nodded. Sure there are. But it was time to close up shop there before they got too close to my tail. This was close by, but far enough. All I need is a metropolitan wasteland, and your country is full of them. Dirty, lots of hiding spots. Lots of people squished into buildings like sardines, it's too easy. There's always an open flame somewhere, or some chemical or gas in the air I can ignite. I mean, shit, I could blow you up right now. Deku became frantic. You planted bombs here. Why? Why here? Pyromancer finally turned his gaze, looking down at them completely indifferent. Ochako felt her stress spike as Pyromancer apathetically focused on her, his complete disregard for life evident in those eyes black as coal. This was no Shigaraki. This man knew exactly what he was doing and he was cool and collected about it. Talking to Izuku was just part of the entertainment his work afforded him. Nope, I didn't need to do that. In fact, before I leave, I'll throw a little wrench into your working theories about me. I don't need to use bombs, they just help with the destruction. Pyromancer pointed ahead. Both Izuku and Ochako followed the finger's trajectory to the stove. One of the cooks turned on a burner, the blue flame sparking to life. Pyromancer didn't want to talk. He wanted to distract. Before Ochako could put two and two together, the air around her suddenly turned frigid. In just a second, the heat had been sucked out of the surrounding area, leaving her breath a tiny cloud as it escaped her mouth. She was frozen in shock, the inability to do anything sliding into her consciousness. It felt as if the whole world were standing still as the stove began to ignite in slow motion. She would not have been able to escape on her own anyway, cried another thought, as she was snatched from her stool by Izuku, the only one capable of outrunning the blast. As she fell into his arms, the sound of the violent explosion suddenly shook the world into playing at normal speed. The fire burst through the restaurant as they narrowly escaped, engulfing the entire corner in flame and light before retreating into the blackened hole it had made for itself. Smoke poured out of the broken building, the fire still wild as it was fed more and more gas from the natural gas pipe. Now a comfortable distance away, Izuku set Ochako on her own 2 feet, and she staggered. Overcome with grief and fear, she threw her arms around him and choked out a, "Thank you." She swallowed her tears as he returned the embrace. They looked back at the smoldering corner, a sick sense of relief washing over them both. Pyromancer was gone. Chapter 6. She had tried to keep her chin up throughout the whole day. That disgusting feeling of having been watched for who knew how long had eaten at her. She felt violated, trapped. She gulped and put on her best mask. As a hero, Uravati would be a target. That had to be expected. She had to bite the bullet and brush it off. She still had to live her life, and that included taking a careless stroll with a close friend in the very neighborhood the predator lurked. What else could she have done? The predator was silent as a mouse, as visible as a ghost, and smarter than most any villain she had ever faced so far. She couldn't follow him into the darkness, drag him out, and make him pay. No, this one was too good at what he did. He had so much practice. She would have never seen him unless he wanted her to. And now, it seemed, he was toying with her. It was all a ploy to distract and unnerve his prey before striking in whatever way he saw fit. Clearly, he wanted her to know he was after her. He wanted her to know why he was killing her. It was important to him. It was another way to continue to prove to himself he was correct and she and Izuku were not. There would be a face-off. Ochako was sure of this. He'd said it himself. Other heroes had squared up against him and lost. Taking out heroes was a different operation entirely from his normal one of torching every sorry soul in sight. He'd wait. He'd let the late afternoon incident sink in and drive his quarry mad before taking it out of its misery. The aftermath of this latest attack only helped his sinister game. There had been no one to rescue in the inferno. The bodies of the patrons that had, at one moment, enjoyed their meals, were charred beyond recognition the next. When the gas was finally shut off, their remains were pulled out of the building, packed into black body bags, and taken away. For Ochako and Izuku, they were both whisked back to the police station, the eighth floor chaotic zoo once more. Every time Ochako explained her version of the story, she felt her strong, stalwart exterior crack more and more. She felt like a rabbit caught in a trap, so exposed and helpless, forced to lie there and wait for the hunter to return to claim her. Nowhere was safe. Her body begged to shake, cry, and become vulnerable, but she refused to allow it. She wouldn't let Pyromancer win. If his goal was to scare her off, then she refused to be scared, at least, right now where the world could judge her. Where he could see her. She swallowed the fear. One outburst in front of Izuku was all she would ever allow herself in public again. Ochako had not been allowed to return to her apartment that night, and instead, was ordered to stay at the police department. It wasn't as if she wanted to go back home anyway. It was no longer secure. She wasn't sure if Pyromancer had intended to kill her or Izuku at the restaurant, or if it was just part of the scare tactic. Either way worked. In the uncertainty, he'd probably destroy her building anyway, just in case or to continue the pursuit. Whatever came first, he didn't seem to mind how long or how much destruction it would take. He clearly had time on his hands along with all that blood. The cots aren't so bad, Izuku spoke into the silence of the elevator, the whirring of the cables the only other noise. His voice snapped her out of her spiraling agita, and she met his green eyes. He had been little more than relieved when the fires hadn't revealed Pyromancer back at the restaurant, but beside that, he didn't seem shaken. Perhaps he was hiding it like she was. Perhaps his disappointment in himself for being caught unprepared was distracting him now, or maybe he was returning the favor. She knew she was awful at hiding her feelings, and if she was feeling frightened, he'd see it much in the way she could always lift his spirits when he found himself in a pit of despair. He always made her feel safe. This was a sticky situation, but together they'd find a way out of it. She could trust him with that. Even now, after everything that had happened, her fear was waning with each passing second alone with him. She was glad he had also been ordered to stay at the police station for the night. She gave him a sideways glance. You just live here, don't you? Izuku blushed at the correct assertion. Well, sometimes. I have a rental, but sometimes it makes more sense to just sleep here, like I had to do last night. The elevator gently landed on the basement level and the doors opened to a pitch-black room. Izuku stepped out and felt the wall until he came to a light switch. Flicking it on, the black suddenly became illuminated with old, fluorescent light. Ochako could now see it was a large space where bunk beds and cots sprawled across the floor in a grid-like pattern. Each was like a tiny little room, fit with a small dresser and lamp. Most all of them were clean and tidy, save for one Ochako assumed was Izuku's from the night prior, the comforter a wrinkled ball on the slim mattress. Ochako followed Izuku to his cot and claimed the one directly across from it. She sat, staring at the floor, relieved and fatigued. The lamp on Izuku's side of the aisle blinked on as he pulled the chain, the orange glow from the light bulb becoming lost in the fluorescence from above. Is there anyone you can room with until this blows over? Ochako heavily shook her head. I would room with Sue, but I don't think that's a great idea. I don't want her to get sucked into all of this. I'll probably end up just staying here. Izuku nodded as he walked back to the elevator to shut off the overhead lights. The room was cast in darkness again, save for Izuku's one little lamp. I suppose you're right. Maybe once they have cleared your apartment building and it's safe, we can go over there and get you some extra clothes. He sat on the edge of his mattress and kicked off his red shoes. The aisle between their beds was only wide enough for someone to walk through, putting them in such close quarters that Ochako wondered if she ought to have chosen a different cot. That, in combination with his offer, made her cheeks warm and she thanked the darkness for concealing it. Why, you don't have to do that, Deku. But I guess it can't be helped. I could use a lookout. He turned a bit sheepish. Sorry, I didn't mean to invite myself. I thought it'd just be safer. No, it's okay. You're right. I really appreciate it. Ochako laid down, slipping her feet under the covers. This wasn't the first time she had gone to sleep in something other than pajamas because of work, and it always came with its own discomforts. This time it was knowing that she wouldn't be able to sleep in her own bed indefinitely, not until Pyromancer was caught. However, Izuku offered her some relief. She delighted in knowing him well enough to anticipate him staying with her for a few more days to ensure she was settled in. Despite the fact that Pyromancer had ruined their outing, he couldn't take away all of the joy that was had before he revealed himself. Even now, Ochako couldn't stay scared and miserable as long as Izuku was smiling at her like that. It's no problem, he said in a soft voice. He slipped under his own covers and yanked on the chain to his lamp. The light went out. I'm just sorry dinner went from nice ramen to break room pizza. Ochako snorted as she held in a giggle. It's not your fault. Maybe we'll try again when this is all over. Yeah, I'd like that. She could hear him fight with the blanket to cover himself and get comfortable. After a few minutes, she heard him turn over again. Even though she felt emotionally exhausted, sleep hadn't found her yet. Thoughts about what had transpired today kept her up as they snaked their way in and out of her consciousness. She tossed and turned. A few more minutes passed and then a few more and a few more. There were all kinds of villains. There were those that committed crimes out of greed or lust, stealing, conniving, even killing over some sort of transaction. Money and sex drove them. Those were the easy ones. Villains out to get what was theirs. Ochako could understand them on some level, although their methods were abhorrent. Desperation, jealousy, and selfishness were present in every human soul. It was action that divided a villain from the masses. Yes, she could follow their logic and their regret. It was the villains with an agenda she couldn't stand. The ones that spoke to her as if she'd come around and agree that it was okay to kill over some flawed philosophy. She tossed and turned again. Pyromancer made her so angry. He had really tried to convince her it was okay for him kill people. To kill her. You still awake? Came Izuku's voice out of the darkness. Had she been keeping him up? Ochako sighed. Yeah, I just keep thinking about what Pyromancer said. There was a moment of silence. She heard him turn over and suddenly his voice sounded closer. Do you think he had a point? No number I just. Ochako paused, trying to find the words, the exact reason as to why this villain's statements evoked such a frustrated sort of helplessness in her. The things he said about considering who we save. It's not a new concept. It just reminds me that no one really understands what we're doing out there. Does that make sense? Yeah, I was thinking that too. And, I don't know, does it make you angry? Pyromancer isn't the only one disappointed in the fact that we save everyone, including villains. I just wish people understood that, as first responders, our job is to bring people back alive. That's it, it isn't our place to judge the people we save. Not everyone we save is going to be a saint. It makes no difference, though. It can be a little frustrating sometimes, Izuku said softly, his voice calming Ochako's nerves. But, I can't be too upset by it, I mean, even we saw the world that way back in high school. And, well, we'd probably still think of it that way now if we weren't heroes. I know. You're right. Ochako sighed, her frustration leaving her. She exhaled loudly. Sorry. I don't mean to rant at this hour. Not with everything that's happened today. Izuku chuckled. Don't worry about it, it's always back and forth with us, you know. Wasn't I unloading my frustrations to you just a few hours ago? Wasn't that a revelation? It really is like that, huh? Ochako softened, letting that irony sink in since they'd met it had been like that. A constant battery of certain death trials that they always managed to pull the other through, always the other's hero. I suppose that means it's my turn next. I'll try to stay out of trouble. Ochako giggled. I'll be on standby. The police department wouldn't return to normalcy anytime soon. With an accurate depiction of Pyromancer from two seasoned heroes, the force refused to rest until he was caught. The bomb squad was called to every building on Echo's list. They swept through every floor with a fine-toothed comb to remove every one of Pyromancer's bombs placed in strategic, out-of-sight spaces within walls and basements. As it turned out, the curious devices were heat-sensitive, made to go off upon reaching a certain temperature that the department had to guess Pyromancer could control. Although his operation was messy, he was clearly very knowledgeable. He'd have to know the important temperatures of common materials. The temperature in which things combust, or melt, is probably something he studied to ensure he doesn't waste his energy. Uravity overheard Deku say to Detective Tsukauchi upon leaving one morning. They fully understood Pyromancer now, his quirk, his motive, his operation, even what he looked like. He was no longer a dangerous enigma. Or so they thought. Over the next few days, that information spread like wildfire as news stations urged anyone with information to come forward. The entire city seemed to be focused in on catching him, as neighboring hero agencies, police and fire departments, even airports and other mass transit were on the lookout. Despite all of this effort, though, Pyromancer disappeared once again. No one saw him. No one knew him. He was a nameless poltergeist that had brought down 4 massive buildings in fire and brimstone, and not a soul witnessed him. It appeared as though only 4 people on the entire planet had ever seen or spoken to Pyromancer and lived to tell the tale. And all 4 of them were harassed for even a sliver of new information. Necromancer never divulged much more, and Echo swore up and down he had given them everything he possibly could. Pyromancer had no real name he could give up, no more buildings, no more targets. That left Izuku and Ochako to run through that fateful evening over and over again, just in case they missed something. Ochako understood that with each passing day, the police became more and more frustrated, more desperate for another breakthrough. She could feel every detail scraped from her memory and slapped onto documentation. At some point, she came up empty. There was nothing more to say about Pyromancer. And just like that, a month passed by. Pyromancer no longer made the headlines. Slowly but surely, the city cleaned up the most recent mess and society forgot about him, distracted with other nonsense. After all, Pyromancer wasn't the only villain roaming the streets. Uravati fell back into a mundane routine, walking her route, training Crow, and answering calls. When out on patrol, she found herself almost forgetting all about the dangerous foreigner who wanted her dead. Today continued that trend. How many copies you guys take out? Uravati cried across the jewelry store. Glass littered the floor and she held a teenager with messy red hair in a chokehold until he disappeared in a cloud of white smoke. The store was filling to capacity with people that all looked the same as this teenager, and they all laughed in unison. His quirk reminded Uravati of Twice, but with a twist. Each copy was simply a younger version of himself, all the way down to an infant he had used to distract the jeweler's employees. Now the real, fully adult version was hiding somewhere in the sea of copies. The villain had no trouble admitting his quirk allowed him to make a copy of himself in the likeness of every year of his life. A daunting task, considering they had no idea how old the man behind the dittos was. Each successful punch, kick, or throw went up in smoke as copies popped out of existence. 4. Flashlight called from his personal blockade at the front door. Has to be 5. Current shouted from the opposite wall as he zapped a copy with his signature red electricity. It feels so weird to punch kids in the face. Yeah, well, I kicked the baby. Crow laughed loudly from overhead as he landed on the skinny shoulders of what had to be the 10-year-old version of the villain. He popped and white smoke surrounded Crow as he went to engage a villain copy around his own age. Flashlight groaned loudly as he blinded one copy with a bright palm before switching to a fist to knock the copy's lights out. Chaos, Thy name is Crow. Ya goddamn right. In the meantime, Uravati grappled with two fully grown versions of the villain as she rolled her eyes. One came at her, ready to tackle her to the ground with a sloppy lunge. Ever since her training with Gunhead, attacks like these almost made her laugh. She slipped out of range, grabbed the villain by the back of his neck as if he were a tiny kitten, then used his momentum to spin around and throw him right back at his companion. They both fell over each other onto the carpeted floor. Subsequent classes with her old mentor in recent years had only made her fighting skills better. If she wasn't known for her quirk, she was known for throwing men twice her size into the pavement underneath her. The moves had earned her a ton of respect in female hero circles, but it also attracted some weird and creepy fans, like the one that rushed to her aid now. Current stomped his huge red boot onto the pair of villains and both popped into a large smoke cloud. The electric-based sidekick beamed at her, his ogre-like teeth just part of the charm. When the jewelry store alarm had gone off, Uravati and Crow were first on the scene and Current, being on the same route, had rushed in to help, with Flashlight not too far behind. It was fortunate to have such a large team ready on short notice to take down a villain who was his own personal army. However, Uravati felt that maybe it would have been okay with just 3 members if it meant she'd be spared from Current's babysitting. Thanks, but I had it under control, Uravati said as she wiped sweat from her cheek. Despite the store's air conditioning, fighting was still a workout. That's okay. I finished them off for you. Current blurted happily. He then punched and popped another copy as it ran to attack him from the side. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. After this we could grab a bite to eat. It's a real shame that Pyro Bastard destroyed the ramen shop I was gonna take you to, though. Really. In the middle of a scuffle. The things that came out of his mouth never ceased to surprise her, but before she could say anything, Crow took the opportunity for a jab. You think it's a shame. I think it's ironic. Flashlight scolded Crow from the door. It's not funny, Crow. Uravati could have been hurt. Off duty no less. I didn't mean ironic as in funny, haha, ironic. I meant it like, literary, irony, symbolic. All that jazz, Crow clarified as he hovered. Never pinned you for a lit kinda guy. Crow muffled a snort. Oh, I'm lit, my guy. You went without me. Current whined, whipping his head around to face a startled Uravati. The villain's younger copies had stopped running around to listen to the ensuing conversations, but the older copies attempted to attack each hero, only to be met with a fist or a foot to the face, save for Current's unlucky attacker. The red-clad hero was so upset, he grabbed the teenage villain and threw him across the store into another teenage copy, causing them both to pop from the impact. Dude, have you ever considered that she's just not that into you? Crow consoled the giant man with a smirk on his face. No. Maybe you should. Uravati massaged her temples as the boys argued while popping villain copies. She murmured to herself, I'm surrounded by idiots.